All right, hey everyone. Hello again. My name is Kevin, and I'm here with Barbara, and together we'd both like to welcome you all to our latest Novedge webinar series episode. For this year's final episode, presenting live from Chicago is Moto Creative Specialist Greg Brown, who will be demonstrating Moto 701's unique features. See how Moto complements other CAD tools, allowing you to experiment with design concepts without worrying about underlying surface structures. The Foundry's Moto 701 enables greater exploration of design ideas and helps you to quickly execute design decisions in no time flat. For those of you who don't know, Greg Brown is a Moto Creative Specialist at the Foundry. He has worked in advertising, print media, as a 3D artist for more than 8 years. Greg has produced work for a variety of high-profile brands, including Coors, McDonald's, Corona, Bacardi, Conoco, Kenmore, Hersheys, Cascade, and many others. So today's presentation is about 40 minutes long, and afterwards we'll have a brief Q&A where Greg will answer your questions live. Submit yours to us at any time into the chat window below. But before we get going with today's presentation, here's an overview of what we do at Novedge. Barbara?
Hi, the Novedge webinar series is brought to you by Novedge.com. As one of the largest online design software store, we offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. To pick up a copy of Moto 701 and to see our complete catalog of tools from the Foundry, you're welcome to call and speak with our specialist, Bob Thayer. You can reach him by his email address, bob@novedge.com. And to get a glimpse at who is changing the world of design one step at a time, please visit Novedge's very own blog. Every week, our interviews shine a light on those innovators whose work break out from the norm. For more details, please visit us today at blog.novedge.com. And to catch up with the latest product promos and Novedge webinars, like us on Facebook. Get ready. We're working on our lineup of Novedge webinars for next year. So while today's presentation might be the last of 2013, get set for another year packed with demos, sneak peeks, and how-tos for your favorite design tools, both new and old. Head over to novedge.com/webinar series for the most up-to-date schedule. By the way, we could use your help to figure what webinars to showcase. If you have any suggestions, you're more than welcome to drop us a line at kevin@novedge.com. And Kevin?
Hey there, I almost lost control of the control panel, but yeah, thanks, Barbara. Last but not least, today's webinar is being recorded live. If you want to rewatch episode 97 in its entirety, as always, you can find it on our Novedge webinar series channel through Vimeo and YouTube. And with that said, Greg, are you ready?
Yeah, certainly. Just loading up a file real quick, but we can go ahead and switch the screen on over.
Cool. Right about now. Take it away. Enjoy, guys. Let us know if you guys have any questions in the chat box, too. Okay? Thanks.
Okay, how's it going, everybody? Sorry for the slow update speeds here on the screen, but as we spoke about just a few moments ago, if you didn't catch it, if you're having any trouble following along, just chime in. They'll notify me, and I'll try and back up or slow things down for you so you really understand what's happening. Now, a few of the things I'm going to be showing you today are some scenes that relating to design of environments, design of characters, and how Moto's broad tool set can aid you in the process of developing very, very complex scenes from the design process all the way through final execution. Now, as you see here, I have a very basic scene that is kind of like, you know, a 300-year-old Roman town or a portion of one. And inside of this scene, I'm going to be showing you how I can use some of Moto's different tools to kind of, you know, design the set as I'm actually building it out. Now, if you'll notice, as I move around, a few things I want to point out. Because we're getting slow update speeds through the streaming, I do have a GL meter down here, so you can see the actual performance that I'm experiencing on my end. Sorry, not exactly as pleasant for you, but at least you can tell how well Moto performs, because that's one thing we're very proud of, is Moto performs is extremely high performance. Now, one of the first things we're going to come over to is item mode. In Moto, item mode is used to select various items that we contain within our item tree. And if I go ahead and expand this scene right here, expand this group, you can see that each of these different items I'm selecting are different items in the item tree. And this allows me to better organize and contain different mesh items. And say, for instance, I wanted to come in and do a little bit of modeling on this roof. If you'll notice, here along the top of this roof back here, I have some nice organic detail. This is the kind of detail that would really take way too long to model in, way too much thought in advance. But Moto has a lot of very slick modeling tools that help you add nice details like this quickly and easily. So first off, item mode, select my roof object, and I'll come into polygon mode. Moto has component modes, and that would be vertex selection, edge selection, and polygon selection. This is how you edit geometry in Moto. And I'm cycling through these different selections using the space bar, so a nice way to switch between your selection types. So as I come over to vertices or edges, I can select a variety of components and continue cycling through those selections. Great way to control things. Now we have fall-offs to aid in the process of modeling. So if I wanted to add this nice kind of broken down organic detail to this roof, I can come over to fall-offs, noise, and I can press the W key for the move tool, and I can just go ahead and pull right on up along the y-axis. You can see I'm editing this rooftop with really no effort at all. And we have more control here. If I come over to, say, for instance, my scale controls, you can see that I'm actually adjusting the scale of that noise fall-off. Now, it's a great way to add organic detail, but in a way, you're kind of stuck, right? You've done it, and it's over with. Not really, because, for instance, you can use Moto's morphs. If I come over to my lists tab right here, come over to morph maps and create a new morph. Go ahead and let that be created. I can go ahead and use that morph map right here, drop the tool, and if I deselect it, you can see that now I have that deformation, contained in a morph map that I can pull up at any point in time. And so if I deselect that, I can also use this as a deformer, so I can animate it. So I can add an item, and I can go ahead and add a Morph Influence, come over to my properties, and I need to turn on visibility of my morphs, so enable deformation. And I'm sorry I'm having to navigate around all these viewports. We are streaming this at 720p, which is a little small for this interface. But here we go. You can see that I can actually choose my morph map. Okay. One second. Ooh. Gotta make sure that item actually has the morph on it. There we go. Grab my morph item. For some reason that morph influence just does not want to show up for me. Excuse me. A little bit of trouble coming around in this interface right now. So maps, move that right on up. And okay, there we go. So way too strong, but that's actually what we want. Come back over to my Morph Influence, make sure the tool is dropped, and for some reason I'm not getting my selection. You can add the Morph Influence as an influence item that will help you control the effect of a morph map, and that way you can kind of modulate it at a later point in time. It's a way of kind of using history while you're modeling. All right, so if we move a little bit forward, I'll show you how I also use some of Moto's other fall-off tools. I'll come into item mode, select, for instance, the beams and posts down here, come into polygon component mode, and press Shift plus the up arrow key. And as you can see, I'm selecting all polygons surrounding the first poly that I selected. So Moto has some really great selection tools to help aid you in the modeling process. And so if I come over to fall-offs and turn on selection, it'll actually base the fall-off on what I've selected. And so you can see right here, it's actually falling off all the way towards the back right there. And I can adjust the steps interactively, allowing me to actually have even more control as to how this fall off is performing. So it's a nice way to kind of tweak and tune separate elements and how they interact with one another. All right, so let me go ahead and turn my fall offs off. And one of the next things I want to show you is Moto's Dynamics Engine. This is a tool that oftentimes is not used in the design process, but we have such fast updates with our Dynamics Engine, it's kind of an important thing to kind of clarify that you can actually use it in set dressing and designing the look of your environment, because environments are oftentimes full of, random just garbage and crap all over the place pretty much. And what I've done to create these piles of bricks that you see here and these barrels that you see in this corner and these posts over here is just set up piles of junk and throw them into different areas. So if I come to item mode and I select this item right down here on the bottom, this is the only actual mesh item out of this whole group. All the rest of these are instances, and it makes it really easy for me to control dynamic simulation. So let me come over to the Setup tab, and now you can see that actually we have this one gray item here. All the rest are pink because they're instances. And if I want to throw this over into the corner, I've already set up my simulation, and I can run a live simulation, which is a simplified high-speed version, and just click right there and go ahead and just toss these bricks over into the corner. And take a look at how interactive Moto is. I can even, while the simulation is running, go in and select various different components. I can even modify the simulation attributes for those different components. But usually, when you're designing, you have to go through a lot of different iterations. You're trying out different things. And so we need to be able to change these settings very quickly and easily. And so if I come over to my item menu and grab my debris drop group, I can actually move the location quickly and easily. And furthermore, if I grab that one source item, I can modify all the dynamic settings for every component. So if, for instance, I wanted to change the force that's being applied in a particular direction, I can go ahead and press -20N to increase the force, and I'll come down here and rerun the simulation. And you can see we get an entirely different simulation almost instantly. And what if you wanted to actually add more bricks, because obviously there's a lot of junk in an environment, so we probably want to, as we're developing a simulation, grow in complexity. So I can grab this whole group, duplicate the entire hierarchy, offset this, move it around a little bit, and maybe you want to change the actual settings on the source item, because right now they're borrowing the information from this whole group over here. So I'll grab my dynamic settings, change my impulse to the opposite direction along X, and zoom on out here so you can see this, press play, and I can see we're getting two entirely different simulations almost instantly. And maybe we want one individual item in this group to go completely separately from everything else, and we can do that as well. And so I'll reverse this one object and drop that. Go ahead and press play. Now you see we have that other brick going the opposite direction. So setting up simulations in Moto is very straightforward, and it's a nice way to add organic style detail to your scenes, and really love kind of even playing around with the dynamics engine, soft bodies, all that stuff. Really straightforward and easy to use inside of Moto. Now on to one of my favorite components of Moto, and that is our render previewer. Because any process in 3D really involves texturing, shading, actually recreating the realistic elements that bring an object or a scene to life. And Moto's render previewer is absolutely exceptional. So I'll go ahead and on my keyboard I'm pressing F8 to launch our render previewer. I will take it off of pause, and I will scale this on down a little bit. And this is our full-blown render in a progressive state. We have a bucket renderer and also this progressive renderer. And as you can see, I'm actually rendering this scene with full global illumination, which is lighting coming from your environment, which is usually a very complex thing to render, and also with direct illumination for sunlight, things of that sort. And usually when you have lots of different layered materials, this type of complex lighting, scenes are very slow to render, but you can see in our render previewer, it renders very quickly. You can get a look very quickly and easily. And if I go ahead and I start navigating around in here, I'm going to try and move slowly, because this is actually like so fast, like there's no way the screen updates are going to keep up with this. But you can see I'm moving in towards one particular area. I let go, and it starts to refine. So you get a nice quick idea of how your scene looks, and then you can zoom into the particular areas and refine your materials very easily. And if I even hover my mouse over one area, I'm not too sure if you guys can see it refining underneath my mouse, but right now the previewer is rendering only underneath my mouse, refining that one area. So if you have a complex scene, you can get a really nice, precise look at one region of your scene. Just go ahead and navigate around. I've even gone so far as to set keyframes for camera animation through the render previewer, because it's that fast. We made some major improvements with it for Moto 701. Now, if you'll notice, these boards here actually are quite nice, especially considering the way that they're made. There is only one single tiling texture across all of these boards, and the rest of the shading is being controlled by two advanced shaders in Moto called the Occlusion Shader and the Variation Texture. And this allows you to add, variation and painterly style details with almost a click of a button. And this is something that I find designers often run into, where they don't want to spend the time to go in there and maybe dirty up a surface ever so slightly, or go into those fine texturing details. This is a way to add those details without having to spend 2 days of your time actually painting it in. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on top of these boards right here, and I'm going to come over to our shading tab right here. This is our shader tree, and any area I click on top of in this render previewer, it will actually grab the material associated with that in our shader tree, which is a really great way of working. Furthermore, if you wanted to just make adjustments to your material directly through the shader tree, you can right-click on it, and it'll bring you the actual material itself for that particular object just by clicking on it. And also, if you notice that as I left-click, it actually selects the items in the OpenGL view simultaneously. All right, so let's go ahead and start messing around with some of the texturing attributes on these wood planks right here. And let this refine a little bit. All right, I'll come over to our Occlusion Shader and our Variation Texture and turn both of those off. And let those update really quickly. Reset this so you can actually see the effect without them on. And take a look at this. Everything is very desaturated, as you can tell. And also, there's less variation per board. And really, the repetition starts to show up at this point. Now, if I go ahead and I turn on the Variation Texture, you're going to see that we get some really nice variation instantly. What it's doing is down here in our texture attributes, I'll expand this. We are actually, the variation source is set to mesh part. That means any items that are not welded together, because all these boards are on one layer, but the vertices are not welded together. It's randomly selecting those different items to assign a different color to based on a gradient, which you see down here from white to black to red. And if I go ahead and I add another keyframe right there, go ahead and change the color to yellow, you're going to notice now it's randomly adding, green to my scene. Now, really hard to see though in the render preview, right? That's one of those things where it's like, I see the effect, but I don't know exactly what that layer and that layer itself is doing. Well, you can use current layer overlay, and this, for shading processes is, it's a lifesaver. This is actually exactly what that one variation texture layer is doing. So if I actually cut out that keyframe, you'll notice now we no longer have green being randomly selected, and every board is having a random value of white, black, or red added to it. Now the Occlusion Shader. This one, again, it's a lifesaver because it adds painterly style details with ease. And so now we're taking a look at just what that layer and that layer alone does in our scene. And if you'll notice, it's adding these nice borders around the wood sections. And that gives a nice wear look to everything. But furthermore, it's actually even being masked out by this hybrid procedural texture. And if I go ahead and turn this off and on, we can take a look at just that procedural layer that is masking it. You see it's cutting out different sections. So you have a lot of really nice controls as far as being able to see how you're layering up your different shading components, what the effect is on the scene, and at the same time in the context of the rest of your scene. Now, the Occlusion Shader, if you'll notice right now, it's just adding those nice worn edges. There's a whole lot of other different options. You can set the type, for instance, to downslope, which is really great to try and make drippy bottoms on bridges, things of that sort. You can mask it out with all sorts of different procedurals to give it algae is growing underneath the bridge, things of that sort. Really easy to add these nice painterly style details quickly and easily. Now, furthermore, if you'll notice our shader tree, right now I'm just working on just the planks and the planks object here alone. Now, Moto has a really interesting shading technique that allows for local versus global shading. Right now, we are shading locally with the Occlusion Shader that I'm showing you here. But what if I had an Occlusion Shader that was being used to make a dirt shader? I could actually choose to cast it over the entire scene, or just over one object. So for instance, you see this occlusion shader is here in planks. If I wanted to cast this over the entire scene as a whole, I just bring it up underneath my base shader right there, and will affect all these different materials beneath it. And so now you can see that the occlusion shader with current layer overlay is affecting my whole scene. And if I want to turn off current layer overlay, I can actually see the effect of that, how it's affecting the whole scene. So really, really cool ways of being able to control how your scene is being shaded or textured. And all this, of course, can be baked out to UV maps or as renders in ways that you can go ahead and continue to composite or paint further on top of. All right, so let me go ahead and switch that on back over because that downslope looks terrible right now, considering it doesn't have all the right procedural layers set up with it. Okay, and now we're back to having our original occlusion shader. Oh, concavity, I want convexity. All right, so UVs. Now, if we wanted to bake these textures out to UVs to be able to be brought into, say for instance, a compositing application like Nuke to continue or aiding the process of developing a scene such as this, Moto has amazing UV tools. And right here along the top, along our tab layout, we have a UV layout that I'm going to go ahead and enter right now and show you how easy it is to make structural style UVs. If I come over to my list menu and expand this a little bit, we have UV maps, and I'll go ahead and open up this UV map. This is the existing UV map that's being used to actually do all the texturing you've already seen in the render previewer, and really pretty nice. These are good UVs, but what makes them great UVs is how long they took. If I create a new UV map right here, we'll name that 22 just to make sure I don't overwrite any other UVs. And if I come over to the UV projection tool, we have a lot of different options as far as how we want to project our UVs, especially for structural items. We have different projection types, and in this case, I'm going to use Atlas. Just click in the viewport, and there you have it. These are pretty much the same exact UVs as you saw before, but it only took one click. So when you're setting up UVs for a lot of different components in a scene, this is a lifesaver. I mean, it really, really helps you be able to get through this process quickly and easily. But the controls that you have with our UV tools are just exceptional. One of the things about Moto is the way that we like to articulate is the way it was architected. Moto, it was made to be modular. For instance, we have this core application, which is Moto, and everything else is a module. Modeling is a module. UVs are a module. Sculpting is a module. And for that reason, we can reuse different tools from different components easily. So, a couple of versions ago, we decided, hey, why don't we go ahead and incorporate our sculpting tools in our UV tool set? I mean, of course, people would want to use sculpting tools for UVs. So I open up my UV Sculpt tab right here. I'll go ahead and expand out my brush, and you can see that I can click and drag and grab any of the different components of my UV map here. And furthermore, I can go in, and if you have some UVs that are really not unwrapping well, I can go ahead and smooth those out, and that's way too far, as you can see. But if you just want to try and get your UVs locked and maybe smooth out within, you can turn on locked borders and smooth out within those borders themselves. So great control as far as UVs are concerned. Furthermore, I showed you earlier fall-offs, and what if I wanted to use a fall-off in the UV view? And so I'll just go ahead and create a radial fall-off right here, press the W key for the Move tool, and now I can actually edit my UVs, and they respect the fall-off that I have added to my UV window right here. So just kind of amazing how well Moto can reuse a variety of all of its various tools to kind of aid in ways that you might not have thought of initially. Okay, now baking. Now when you want to actually bake out an object to a UV map, it's very straightforward. Say for instance I want to bake out just this wall right up here. This is one UV map, the one that we created. All I have to do is go up to Render, Bake to Render Outputs, and it'll actually bake right down to that UV map quickly and easily. And furthermore, it'll actually, what I'm doing is I'm baking down all that really high quality lighting that you saw in the render previewer. And also, it's not only baking down the lighting, but it's baking it down in layered outputs. So each of these different outputs can be layered together in Photoshop or a compositing application to produce a proper linear composited workflow. But in just one fell swoop, you can render out all these different layers. So an ambient occlusion output, for instance, which is always helpful. Things like alpha outputs on a per item basis. You can have an alpha output for each and every single one of your different items or materials. Just huge amounts of controls for our renderer in general, in this case for baking. I'm going to go ahead and abort this render so that we can continue to move forward with this, this demo. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this scene on down. And the next scene I'm going to show you is something a little bit more character-oriented. And I'll come over to our Model Quad tab and open up this guy right here, and I'm going to kind of show you the process of being able to, how well Moto is capable of working with other 3D apps such as sculpting applications like ZBrush or Mudbox, and how well Moto can do that on its own and also in tandem with, and show a variety of the tools associated with workflows such as that. This is Hero. He is a character that I worked on in Moto and ZBrush. And if I press the 0 key here on my viewport, you can see things are getting really constrained by this 720p resolution. But Moto's viewport is actually entirely modular, just like we were kind of talking about as far as Moto as a whole before. If I just press the 0 key in any viewport, I can expand or contract that viewport. And in this case, we'll expand the 3D viewport so you can really see the character. Now, if you notice, this Hero character is very, very low resolution. And the reason for this is I actually created a 32-bit 8K vector displacement map that I apply to this character and can then actually bake it into the surface of the character so he becomes a multi-resolution mesh inside of Moto that I can continue sculpting on and continue texturing on top of. So if I go ahead and turn on this image map, right now Moto is loading up, like I said, a 32-bit 8K image, so get a few seconds. It takes a little while to load up that much data, but I like to kind of make sure that if I'm transferring sculpt detail from one application to another, I capture all the detail I can. Now this is something only Moto can really do, is be able to A, open up a vector displacement such as this and apply it to your model, and B, being able to edit it after the fact. Because one thing about vector displacements is they cause UV seams, and this is one major problem. You kind of see it on this object right now, even though he's in this low-res mode. But as I convert this object to a multi-resolution, it'll become more apparent. Now, first off, I'm going to come over to our paint layout, because that is probably the best place for me to use the Convert to Multi-Resolution tool, and come over to Utilities and Convert to Multi-Resolution. And set the subdivision level. I'm going to set that to 5. And what this is going to result in is a 5 million polygon model inside of Moto that is actually sculptable. And all the detail originally came from an external sculpting app. Now, part of the reason why I like doing, coming back to Moto is because there's a lot of interesting things I can do modeling-wise using our topology tools to add detail and continue designing on top of this character, especially regarding clothing, because I would say definitely good old Hero here, he's been without pants for way too long, and he definitely needs some pants. Yeah, he doesn't have pants yet, not leading into anything later, but he needs pants. So anyway, I'll come over to the Sculpt tools, come over to the Push tool, turn Symmetry on along the x-axis. You'll notice down here in the GL view, I have 5.29 million polys, and my frames per second, as you can see, is obnoxiously high. I mean, it's touching on 300 plus FPS. Now, if I go ahead and come over to the Smooth Brush, I like to show people the Smooth Brush with the soft filter, because it's actually kind of one tool that people don't really know a lot about. In Moto, the Smooth Brush is different than just holding down the Shift key, which, like many other sculpting applications, will let you use a smooth brush. But the smooth brush with the soft filter really allows you to come in on top of the mesh and smooth out existing, need my fall-offs off, excuse me, smooth out existing details without kind of destroying the detail you've already added. So, all right, that fall-off keeps on wanting to come on back. And I want to turn it off, but I will turn it off in a second. As you can see, it actually does a great job of maintaining the continuity of the surface. And smooth brush. Coming around the neck. There we go. And you can see how well this the Sculpt tools perform on even a 5.3 million polygon mesh. Just to let you know, the largest model I've ever brought into Moto and sculpted on top of, I'm actually working on now, is a character called the Weretoad, and that is 60 million polygons. And Moto's actually able to chew that right on up. All right, so you can see that I'm able to get rid of and fix any sort of displacement errors. One of the reasons I like using vector displacements is look at that wonderful detail in and around the eye. That's all achieved with the displacement, and very challenging to do with a standard grayscale displacement, and so it really makes Moto distinct. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and continue working on this model and like adding details, I can go ahead and continue modeling inside of Moto, designing components like, say for instance, his hair, things like clothing, maybe the collar around his shirt, cuffs around his his suit. And as you can see, I just turned on all those hero bake part layers, and I created his hair inside of Moto because I want to be able to see it in the render preview, or I want to be able to see really how this is going to look in a render, see him in context. And I actually used our Topology Tools to come in and start retopoing details like what basically the design of a suit, where his collar is going to go, where clothing seams are going to be, where his cuffs are going to go, things of that sort. Things that are very hard to sculpt because they are such a fine level of detail. Now, how I actually did this, I'll go ahead and turn off our hero bake parts layer, is I used our Topology Tools. And so if I come over to our Topology tab right here, this contains all of our Topology Tools, and if I create a new item, a new mesh item, and make sure that is visible, grab our Topology pen and come into polygon mode. I want to be in a component mode for this. I can go ahead and hover over my character that I've created here, left click and drag out, and create some new geometry. Now I want symmetry off. It just it's one of those things. I prefer having no symmetry when I'm developing my topology and mirroring it on over. And I want to have my topology mode on so you can see it. So hold down the control key, left click and drag out. You can see really nice and easy to create geometry constrained to your background object with no setup. All right, so not touching anything on the keyboard right now at all. As I hover over this object, this polygon, it automatically selects a poly. As I hover over an edge, it selects and grabs an edge as I left click on top of it. And same thing with vertices, and makes it very easy to alter your geometry, which is important. And if I want to create new geometry, just hold down the Shift key, left click, and drag out. And I've now created some new geometry to work with. It just pulls that new geo right on out. Now, you of course are not limited to creating one polygon at a time. That would be kind of absurd. So for instance, if I want to grab a whole loop, Shift plus right click will pull a whole loop on out. And I can still go in there and continue editing each and every individual component. The Topology pen really is like 8 Moto modeling tools all in one, with background constraints already enabled and nicely streamlined. And if you aren't familiar with using any of the keybinds, which are in our documentation, you can come right on over here to the tool property settings and go ahead and enable any of these components on your own. Now, if I wanted to, say for instance, delete, I just hold on the control key and middle mouse click. And if I want to create some new geometry that attaches, I'm just holding down Shift plus left click. And as I drag near some new geometry, you can see just like it just snaps immediately. It automatically connects to any geometry or vertices surrounding it. And so great ways to create watertight meshes. Now, if I wanted to create, for instance, the collar, I'd actually want to be using the Topology Tools and Modeling Tools simultaneously. So I'll grab the Topology pen. I need some more geometry slicing through here. I can slice right through and decide by left-clicking and dragging where I want that edge slice to be. And I can also maybe select one edge, press the L key, and it'll select a loop. Maybe I want this geometry to be denser. I can actually, in the Topology view, press the D key, and my mesh will stay constrained even though I just subdivided the mesh. So it's easy to add geometry and then go in there and continue tweaking it. And all right, so I'll go ahead and grab this edge right here. Now, what if I wanted to select one edge after another, like skip one? I can skip an edge. Up arrow key will select the next edge following, skipping it, and down will deselect. So really great selection methods. So L for loop, model, deform, and the push tool. Click in the viewport. And now, since I'm using a modeling tool that I access here through the model palette, it's actually not constrained to the background, and I'm pushing it off the surface. I'll go ahead and drop that, close my modeling tools, topology pen, and shift plus middle click. You can see now, again, it is constrained to the background object, and I've created the beginnings of a collar. And so really, really cool ways of being able to work. And a couple other neat things here. If I turn off my topology mode and my vertices, you'll be able to see the actual mesh I generated. Now, what if I wanted to have a nice crisp edge right here? I'll select both those edges, L for loop, and vertex map edge weight tool. We have live weights in the viewport, so you can see that I can, just by left clicking and dragging, add edge weights to my object, and it's a great way to be able to tune and refine your form without having to add extra geometry that's, closely spaced together to create nice, crisp, clean transformations. All right, so I'll go ahead and delete that layer, come back to my primary mesh layer, and now I'm going to show you a few other really cool topology tools inside of Moto. If I zoom on out, I actually want to bring my level down for this character, down to, say, level 3, because this tool is a very demanding tool. It is the contour tool. And I'll turn back on my topology mode, come back to my mesh layer, empty mesh layer. Now, the contour tool creates, I'm sure you guessed it, contours. And if I just come over here in an empty mesh layer with my background object visible, left click and drag out, you see we get this nice line. Dragging out in the viewport, I let go, and it automatically creates a contour snapped around my surface. Now you can see I took a look around, I came back, and I'm still editing and tweaking this. So it's, it's a live tool that allows you to really kind of get exactly the arrangement that you want to have before you move forward. And just like the other modeling tools in Moto, if you hold down the Shift key, that lets you reuse your tool. So I can go ahead and Shift click and drag out and start creating loop after loop after loop, and really refining a nice distribution. And like areas like down here around where the cuff is, this always gets me. I never get it quite right. And so it's nice that I can just undo it or continue tweaking it. Oh yeah, that is definitely not correct. All right, and so there we go. Bingo. All right, I'm happy with that. It's close enough. Probably wouldn't be happy with that in the real world, but for now, it'll do. All right, since I created these loops in order, all I have to do now is come over to the bridge tool and use a new component of our bridge tool, and that is continuous bridge. And if I click in the viewport, you can see it automatically generated all that geometry there on my arm, but it's crazy dense, right? I can change my segments down to, say, 2. You can see we get, less rows or spans depending upon the way that you're looking at it. And I can come over to my curve attributes and change these steps down to, say, 10 and get like a nice game resolution model. Or I can just left click and drag here in the viewport and actually get quick real-time adjustments of that geometry right in the viewport. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and set my segments to, well, I'll just click and drag, bring that on up to, say, 6, steps at 30. And the reason for this is I'm actually generating extra components for my character right now. I'm actually adding his clothing. But the way that I was actually generating his clothing was, I wanted to make sure that I didn't destroy the original aesthetic of his form. So I wanted the cuffs to blend in to the existing shape and the collar to blend into the existing shape. And that's one area where the topology tools come in really handy. And if I come into polygon component mode, select a few polys in a row, L for loop, Shift plus the up arrow key to select everything surrounding. Come over to fall-offs, which I've shown you, a selection fall-off. And I can come over to model, deform, and the push tool. And I can click in the viewport and push offset that surface right off and have it blend back in right around the forearm and adjust the number of steps. And so there we go. All right, kind of tweak and tune that until it has a fall-off I'm happy with. I am happy with that. And now I'm going to go ahead and select an edge right here, L for loop, Z for edge extend because we want to extend some edges off of here, but I want to do this in a way where I'm aligned correctly to my selection. Moto has action centers. If I come over here and set it to automatic, you can see that it automatically aligns to world space, our X, Y, and Z axes. But if I change the action center to local, it will actually select the local selection based on the normal direction of your selection. So really great ways of being able to control the way that your object is, selecting, areas surrounding it. Now I want to have my fall off for this, and I need to turn on snapping on my own because I'm using a modeling tool, and I'll come over to settings and turn on constrained background and change my type to vector. Vector is like glue, basically. All right, so if I grab this and pull it on in, you can see that it actually snaps to my background object. I can press the Z key, click on my viewport, R for the scale tool. There we go. I've created my new geometry, and turn my background constraint off. So I'll change that. Actually, I want to change that to point mode because now I'm going to use the edge extend tool, click on the viewport, and point lets you slide over a surface. And now you can see I've created some extra geometry right there so I can define the cuff. And if I turn off my character, turn off my topology mode, shift tab to go into subdivision surface mode, I can now continue using edge weighting to click in the viewport, add edge weights. Once I have an edge weight I'm happy with, I can increase my subdivision level to maybe smooth those edges out a little bit. You can see right there. And I can even go in and use the sculpting tools on top of this. I mean, this is humongously helpful with design. Grab something like the flatten brush, turn multi-res on right through our sculpt HUD, and go ahead and start sculpting on top of an edge weight. Now, another sculpt tool in Moto I love to show off is the attenuate brush. And if I click on the attenuate brush, this is basically erase. And I need to let Moto go ahead and auto-save for me because it's doing that religiously and making sure I don't lose any data. All right, there we go. I can go in and use the attenuate brush to release my existing sculpt. And the amount is very low. And so if I go ahead and set that to its original value, amount 100%, you can see I can erase back all that that flattening that I've done on top of an edge-weighted model. And so this is really kind of incredible. They can use all these different components inside of Moto together to actually go in and refine more and more details, or even explore, a design process. Because things like on a character like this, even going through and trying to figure out, where clothing seams are located, and where, like, what type of hair do I want my character to have? What kind of belt? Moto makes it really easy to be able to go in there and go through iteration after iteration, kind of exploring, the design of various components of your character. All right, so it looks like we're at about 1:45 right now. Want to kind of ask if anybody here has any questions while we're kind of going through any sort of questions and answers. I'll also open up another scene that kind of shows off the raw power of Moto. It's kind of crazy, actually. Takes a few seconds to load up, so it's good question and answer time.
Hey, Greg. So I heard Q&A.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I assigned some questions out to you. I have a first one. Let's see. JP wants to know what kind of machine configuration do you have running on this computer?
On this machine, I am running a Core i7-960, which is about a four-year-old processor, and I also have a GeForce Titan gaming graphics card, which is a pretty awesome graphics card. The machine I usually demo Moto on while I'm out on the road is a MacBook Pro with a GT 650M, and all the demos I'm showing you today can run on that as well.
Cool, very cool. It's just funny when you said Q&A, everybody started blasting questions. So I'm trying to assign them to you. Okay, so hopefully not too loud. Let's see. Edison wants to know, you mentioned linear workflow. Is there any way that you could show us how to set that up?
Well, really, okay, yeah, as far as inside of Moto, certainly. Let me just go ahead and open up a new scene really quickly. I'm going to show this to you with the infamous box and sphere, right? And all right, let's go ahead and come come down so we can see the scene. Another thing that's really cool about Moto, if you'll notice, I have multiple scenes open at once right now inside of one instance of Moto, which is extremely cool. All right, I'll grab this cube. I do not want to subdivide that. I want to make sure my snapping is off. And offset this guy. And I've already destroyed the sphere, but you get an idea. All right, so shading over here underneath the shader tree, this is where you set up all your different render outputs. And if you'll notice that we have final color and alpha output. If I go ahead and press F8 for our render previewer, what you're looking at right now is the final color output. Underneath effects, you can actually view any of these render outputs. So for instance, I can actually look at just the alpha output itself. Now, if I wanted to set up a proper linear compositing, workflow as far as getting all the right outputs, all I have to do is come over to Add Layer and come over to I seem to be missing my render output here for some reason. I think I might have constrained it. Special. Render output, and right-click on effect, and here are all the different outputs that you can add. So, for instance, if I needed a like a diffuse shading total, which would be a component, and maybe I want also another render output. Right-click on that. Maybe I want an ambient occlusion just for good measure. That's not necessarily part of linear compositing workflow, but is oftentimes utilized. And even if I wanted to very easily duplicate one and change its effect, I could go ahead and maybe change that on over to, say, for instance, a reflection shading output. And so it's really easy to set up all the different layers that you need for proper linear compositing workflow. Also, just to kind of clarify, if I come over to effects, we have a lot of really nice outputs that can be used for motion vectors, object coordinates, things of that sort, for more advanced shading techniques that you might find in really nice compositing applications like Nuke. Does that satisfy your question?
I hope so. But yeah, if you guys need any clarifications, just feel free to shoot me an email or shoot Greg an email as well. So, okay, so Jay wants to know if you have any tips for getting more realism out of Moto's skin material preset. Its subsurface scattering is great, but the end result tends to look too plastic and glossy.
I see. Okay, now. The skin material preset inside of Moto is actually really good, but it's kind of difficult to understand because at all times you're always focusing on the end result of your surface color being a combination of a whole bunch of different layers. Personally, I usually build out my own custom skin shader. That way I can actually layer up multiple layers of reflection that have different levels of roughness and multiple layers of specularity that have different levels of roughness. It's kind of a long topic to go into, but it's also one that's probably worthwhile on the forums to go into to also kind of illustrate layered shading techniques. So if you want, if you're a member of the forums, we could start up a thread, and I can kind of go over that with you over the holidays.
Yeah, I just typed in sort of a shortened URL, I guess. It's the foundry.co.uk. So if you guys want to contact Greg, if you guys want to check out, surf the forums and submit your own discussions, head on over there. I'll post another link in the follow-up email as well. But moving on, Barry wants to know, can HDR light sources, lights with HDR maps, can they be used and be used for baking textures?
Yes, most definitely. Like that, Roman village scene I was showing you was actually baking down the HDR lighting into the texture itself, which is great for game workflows for like light maps and things of that sort. But really quickly, I can show you an example of how easy it is to kind of take things a little bit further. And this is a scene that I think a lot of people might be kind of familiar with as far as this is how you set up HDRs in other applications usually. Moto has this great environments tab where you can just drop an HDR into it. In fact, if I come over to our preset browser palette, we have all these environments right here that you can just go through, take a look at. We have kits that include more, or you can add your own HDRs that you download from the web or whatever. But you just double click on it, you can see it actually adds that environment to your scene. But this is really cool because I want to show you how far you can kind of take something. If I go ahead and I select these two components, component mode, pull this on out, come over to the preset browser, and I'm going to grab a vehicle because the preset browser also contains preset meshes, and we will grab the infamous blue Prius. All right, so double click on that, and all right, so we still have way too small of a dome and a ground plane. Scale that on out. All right, so I'm naming a material for the ground, naming that plane, grabbing the sphere, naming that HDR, come over to shading. Now, it's underneath the base shader. I want to bring it up above the base shader because I want to have it to have its own local shading. So I add a shader inside that material, and I can come over here and set my diffuse amount to 0 and material reflection so I can actually access my luminous intensity to, say, 2. And I want to add a layer, and we'll just name that whatever, and we'll set that as OpenEXR float 32-bit floating point. All right, there we go. And I will set that to luminous color, I suppose, since I already set my amount. All right, so if I go ahead and I open up the render previewer, what you're going to see is pretty much nothing. From outside the sphere, you can see, there's some things going on, but we really don't want any light coming in from the rest of the scene. So I'll come over to my environment, set that down to 0, and that way we don't have any light there, and also turn off my direct light. And there we go. All right, so now come open up my sculpt palette, come over to my paint tools, paintbrush, shader tree, make sure my image is actually selected. And what if I wanted to go ahead and paint my own HDRs live in the viewport? There you go. You can actually go ahead and paint an HDR and see its effect. And so if I go ahead and I paint another light there, you can see now it's affecting the scene differently. And so not only can you use HDRs for lighting, but you can actually go in and paint your own. In fact, sometimes I'll go ahead and use a multiple, image layers. So I have like maybe a red light, a green light, and a blue light, just so I can drop them down in the scene and I can see right where a light color is hitting, so I can find my highlights when I'm like producing, a really nice tight lighting setup. And of course, I'm going to have the render previewer open at the same time, which is kind of nuts.
I like how you have the Christmas colors. You're missing green. You're missing just a bit of green.
All right, okay, we can do a little green. No problem. Request.
Okay, just a heads up. This might take a while. I don't know, but Marco wants to know, could you show a quick demo on render with proxies? I don't know if maybe we could do this during the forums, or I'll let you be the judge of that.
Yeah, I'd say like to do a proper demo on that. That's more of a forums thing. Also, that's something that is a little troublesome right now, but that's something that's definitely worth a forum discussion to try and help guide people through that. In fact, what I'll do after we get off this webinar is I'll go ahead and start up a thread for us to maintain a single concise discussion.
Yes.
And I'll send it off to Novedge, and then that way you guys can get a link directly to that thread.
Cool. Sounds good. I was also thinking of having sort of like formatting and forwarding all these questions to you, and then maybe we could do sort of a blog, and that would be another way we could share it as well. So,
yeah, cool.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. All right. So moving on, I think we have time for maybe like a few more questions, but Jay wants to know, do you have any general recommendations about working with skeletons, IK chains, and mesh binding?
Okay. I mean, as far as general recommendations, I guess I'm not too sure.
Forum.
Yeah, as far as general, yeah. General recommendations, yeah, not too sure about that at all.
Okay, let's see.
As far as performance or maybe binding techniques to use, I mean, for instance, one thing, I love Moto's heat binding. Moto's heat binding, if you have a watertight mesh, produces one of the best one-click binds I've actually seen, so I certainly highly recommend that. Yeah, it's first thing off the top of my head. And while questions are coming in, I'll show you this really quickly. By the way, this is a character, a 15 million polygon character I sculpted in ZBrush and Moto. Modeled and sculpted initially in Moto, refined it in ZBrush, and came back and started detailing it inside of Moto. And I then used replicators to create 60,000 replications of the object. So this scene is actually rendering what you're seeing right now, 7 trillion polygons. And so if I go ahead and I hover over, you'll notice that I've got these duplicates of what look like kind of 8 kind of blobby guys. And I'll go ahead and kind of move on over in the render viewport and zoom in. You can see how well the previewer still updates, even though it's rendering with global illumination and has a multi-resolution object that is sculptable. And if you'll notice, as I let one area, little area refine right there, you start to see the little guy. And as I zoom on in, getting closer, and a little bit tighter again. And with instances, you can actually vary each of these characters in really, really interesting ways. In fact, that's kind of a future demo working on. But you can see the fine detail on this guy. Pretty nuts that you can do this through a CPU-based renderer.
And the creepiness factor too, it's pretty high, I gotta say.
Yeah, no, definitely high creepiness factor, no question about that. But it renders pretty fast too. I mean, the pulled out version renders in like 6 minutes, and this close-up version renders in about 1.
Cool.
So really does a great job of refining the scene as it's rendering it.
Very, very neat. Okay, so let's do one more question. I want to let the attendees know that we're going to put all these together, and in the follow-up email, I'll have sort of these website addresses that you can check out and blog at Novedge and also at the Foundry too. So shoot us if you have any other questions. Just shoot us. Okay. Let's see. Let's move to the last one. Edison. Thank you. How about the gamma output? Is that already set?
Yes, it is. You can actually set that 2 ways over here. System preferences. Underneath final rendering, you can actually set your display and output gamma to be, to whatever default you want. And also here, usually the final color is automatically set to 2.2 because you're really dealing with display gamma at that point. But if I add a layer and I add, a render output, right-click on top of this and set that to diffuse shading total, it usually will default to an output gamma of 1.0 for proper linear compositing workflow. So usually my final color is at 2.2 and everything else is automatically at 1.0.
All right, good to go. So let's see, Greg. I guess I'll take over control, and then I think you might need a glass of water because you've been doing a lot of talking. Maybe a snack or two.
Yeah, or a cup of coffee. That's my thing. Yeah, coffee's definitely, coffee. All right, well, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I'll put up a thread really quickly. If you guys find it, it'll be in the Moto section of the forums. And I will go ahead and forward it on to Novedge so that we can kind of start a discussion up.
Yeah, Greg, shoot me that URL through email, and then I'll put it in the webinar follow-up as well. So, yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right, I'm taking over control right about now. Let me know if you guys can see my slides. And I want to make sure I'm not too loud, too. I don't want to kill any eardrums here. Cool. All right. But, yeah, thank you for joining us. Let me put that big thank you slide right here. On behalf of the Novedge team, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Like I said, the forums are there. We're going to format and forward all the questions, so we're going to have it on our blog. Barbara, I think you have some words you want to let us know about.
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
So the Novedge webinar series is brought to you by Novedge.com. To pick up a copy of Moto 701 and to see our complete catalog of tools from the Foundry, you're welcome to call and speak with our specialist, Bob Bayer, and you can reach him at bob.novedge.com. And to learn more about Moto 701 and its unique feature, please visit thefoundry.co.uk. I especially love the new redesign of their website, and I also want to remind you there's a big discount on Moto now on our website. So go on our product page and it lasts till December 23rd, so it will look great under the tree. And to get a glimpse at who is changing the world of design one step at a time, please visit our own blog. And you'll find interviews with amazing innovators and designers. And also, you will find a follow-up with today's webinar with all the questions that were answered today. So, you know, it's always a great tool. And you find our blog at blog.novedge.com. Also, to catch up with the latest product promos and Novedge webinars, you can like us on Facebook, where you'll get all the news, all the promotion, and also great videos like VFX reel from the Foundry that we just hosted today. So get ready, and because we're working on our lineup of Novedge webinars for next year. Today's presentation was the last of 2013, but we have more and more in store for you. And actually, we would like to hear your feedback and see what kind of webinars you would like to see. So please contact us and email Kevin at kevin@novedge.com and let him know what are your webinars, on what's on your wish list for webinars for 2014. Thank you very much.
Oh, I just realized I muted myself. Sorry about that. But yeah, like Barbara said, if you want to rewatch this, if you have any suggestions for webinars, just email me at kevin@novedge.com. I want to hear your feedback, and if you want to hear another Moto webinar, want to see another one, let me know as soon as you can. This webinar is being recorded live, so if you head on over to vimeo.com and youtube.com/Novedge, by today's end, it should be up. And yeah, if you miss anything, that'll be a good way to catch up. But yeah, on behalf of the team, thank you. Greg, do you have any last words before we sign off on today's webinar?
No, nothing in particular. Certainly hope you guys give Moto a good solid try. I think give yourself a week or two, play around with it. What I keep on hearing from these demos is after about that period of time, something just kind of clicks, and we're having a lot of success moving people towards Moto. So yeah, highly suggest giving it a try, and thanks so much for everybody's time.
Yeah, so definitely check out the forums. You can follow us at Novedge, and we're also on Facebook as well. So happy holidays, and we'll see you guys in 2014. All right, cheers.